Antarctica is the southernmost continent on Earth and the least inhabited. Located almost entirely south of the Antarctic Circle and encircled by the Southern or Antarctic Ocean, it is home to the geographic South Pole. Ranking as the 5th largest continent, Antarctica exceeds Europe in size by approximately 40% and is predominantly covered by the vast Antarctic ice sheet, which averages 1.9 kilometers or 1.2 miles in thickness. In contrast to many regions historically labelled as discovered, despite long-standing indigenous populations, Antarctica is unique in that it has never supported a native human population. Antarctica's historical narrative originates from ancient Western speculation about the existence of a vast southern continent referred to as Terra Australis, Latin for southern land. It was sometimes suffixed with non cognita, Latin for unknown. This theoretical landmass was not grounded in exploration or empirical evidence, but was instead a philosophical construct. As early as the 4th century BCE, Aristotle proposed that the northern continents, Europe, Asia, and North Africa, must be counterbalanced by a comparable landmass in the southern hemisphere. This conjecture persisted for centuries, leading to the inclusion of Terra Australis on world maps long before any navigator ventured near the polar regions. The earliest known representation of Terra Australis on a globe is believed to have appeared on the German polymath Johannes Schoner's now lost 1523 globe, which likely influenced French cartographer Aronce Finn's 1531 double quarter-form or heart-shaped world map. Likewise, early cartographic works such as the 1513 Piri Reis map prominently featured a vast southern continent, Terra Australis, though this imagined land bore no geographic relation to the continent now known as Antarctica. By the early 19th century, British navigator Matthew Flinders cast doubt on the existence of a distinct southern continent south of New Holland, now modern-day Australia. He advocated for the name Terra Australis to be reassigned to the Australian continent. This proposal was accepted, and in 1824, colonial authorities in Sydney formally adopted the name Australia, effectively precluding the use of Terra Australis as a designation for the Antarctic landmass. The name of the continent is derived from the term Antarctic, which itself originates from the Middle French Antarctique, meaning opposite to the Arctic. This in turn traces back to the Latin Antarcticus and ultimately the Greek Antarctikos, literally meaning opposite to the north. The modern name Antarctica came into established use during the 1890s and is widely credited to Scottish cartographer John George Bartholomew, who is believed to have been the first to formally apply the term to the continent. This, however, leads to an enduring question. With no native human population, who was the first to lay eyes on Antarctica? On the 17th of January 1773, during Captain James Cook's second voyage, comprising HMS Resolution and Adventure, Cook's expedition became the first known voyage to cross the Antarctic Circle, entering the Ross Sea region. Although Cook did not set eyes on the continent itself, he ventured to within approximately 120 kilometers of the Antarctic mainland before being forced to turn back due to encroaching pack ice. The following year, he reached a latitude of 71 degrees 10 minutes south, again without sighting land, but noted rock fragments embedded in icebergs, suggesting the proximity of a southern landmass. By 1775, Cook had grown increasingly convinced of the continent's existence. While he maintained some caution in his official reports, he nonetheless declared the presence of a polar landmass to be probable. In another version of his journal, he expressed even greater certainty, writing, "I firmly believe it, and it is more than probable that we have seen a part of it." Some of the earliest individuals to venture closer to the Antarctic continent were sealers, who pushed progressively farther south while navigating around Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America. It was understood that sailing deeper into southern latitudes often brought stronger winds, which allowed for faster passage, albeit at the considerable peril posed by drifting icebergs, treacherous seas, and powerful gales that could easily overwhelm vessels and crews. These early sealing voyages, however, were typically unrecorded and lacked any scientific purpose. One of the few tangible traces of this era is the oldest known human remains discovered in the Antarctic region, a skull dated to between 1819 and 1825, belonging to an indigenous Yamana woman. Unearthed in 1985 on Yamana Beach in the South Shetland Islands, she is believed to have been in her early 20s and died on a sealing mission. The identity of the first person to lay eyes on the Antarctic mainland remains a subject of historical debate. For many years, the distinction was attributed to Edward Bransfield, an Irish-born officer in the Royal Navy who participated in a British expedition aboard the vessel Williams. On January 30th, 1820, Bransfield is believed to have sighted the Trinity Peninsula, the northernmost extremity of the Antarctic Peninsula. He reported observing high mountains covered with snow, one of which was subsequently named Mount Bransfield by the French explorer Jules de Montdeville. The sea passage between the Antarctic Peninsula and the South Shetland Islands was later designated the Bransfield Strait in his honour. However, the actual earliest confirmed sighting of the Antarctic continent is generally credited to January 27, 1820, 3 days prior to Bransfield's observation. On this date, Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, a captain in the Imperial Russian Navy, documented viewing what is now understood to have been part of the Antarctic ice shelf. This event occurred during the first Russian Antarctic expedition, a 2-year global voyage undertaken to chart new territories on behalf of the Russian Empire. The expedition was commanded by Bellingshausen and Mikhail Lazarev, who sailed aboard the sloop of war Vostok and the support vessel Mirny. Their ships became the first since Captain James Cook's to cross the Antarctic Circle, and on January 27, 1820, they approached within approximately 32 kilometers of the Princess Martha coast. It was here Bellingshausen recorded a sighting of what he described as
матерой лед,
a Russian term typically rendered as solid or hard ice, language that in hindsight likely referred to an ice shelf fringing the Antarctic mainland. The expedition initially charted an eastward course, navigating as far south as ice conditions allowed. With the onset of winter, the ships altered course and proceeded to Sydney for resupply and repairs. While in Australia, Captain Bellingshausen compiled a report expressing skepticism about the existence of a southern continent, suggesting that he did not interpret his earlier observations as evidence of a landmass. However, during the following summer, Vostok and Mirny resumed their voyage into Antarctic waters. Continuing eastward, the expedition recorded the discovery of Peter I Island and Alexander I Island, though the latter would not be confirmed as a separate landmass from the Antarctic Peninsula until aerial surveys in 1940. The expedition then turned north along the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, eventually arriving at the South Shetland Islands. There, on the 5th of February 1821, near Deception Island, the Russian vessels encountered the American sloop Hero, captained by 21-year-old American Nathaniel Palmer and manned by a crew of 4 additional men ranging in age from 16 to 31. Palmer and his crew had reached the Antarctic Peninsula on the 17th of November of the previous year, making them the first Americans and the third known party overall to lay eyes on the frozen continent. Although Edward Bransfield clearly recognized the significance of his observations at the time, Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen's own sighting was marked by uncertainty. He was apparently unsure whether he had encountered land or merely a massive iceberg. For many years, Bellingshausen's claim received little recognition. Upon his return to Russia, public and scholarly interest was limited. His journals were inaccurately translated, and inconsistencies in recording the precise date of his observations further clouded the matter. However, modern scholarly reassessment and more accurate interpretation of historical records have led to a consensus that Bellingshausen's expedition was the first to visually identify the Antarctic continent. Thus, remarkably, after remaining hidden from human knowledge for hundreds of millennia, the first 2 verified sightings of Antarctica occurred within the span of just 3 days. This hasn't made Jack, and if you're in Antarctica right now, please leave a comment down below.